Today on Sekulow, Biden's DHS Secretary testifies to Congress that, quote, the border is no less secure as migrants are flooding the United States.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow.
Do the results that you're seeing and their magnitude suggest to you that your plan is wrong, that your plan is ill-conceived and is plunging the nation into a crisis?
No.
We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110.
The question is the border more secure now under your leadership?
Congressman, it is no less secure than it was previously.
And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
First of all, it's an outright lie, but second, that should not be the standard for anybody, right? I mean, when you're a new administration, you want your new policies, and you're supposed to be working, and you're elected to put in new policies. The standing bearer is not, well, it's no worse than it was before, which, by the way, is an outright lie just based off the numbers of people. A shocking number just right off the bat. Between 2017 and 2020, he said 3-year period, 1.3 million people were encountered at the border illegally. So that's the number of people that CBP and were able to actually encounter, stop, somehow either they were deported or they got a time to show up at court. We don't, to break out those numbers. But just think about that. That's 1.3 million people. That's a lot of people in 3 years. This year alone, which is not over, it's 2021, over 1.5 million. So we're surpassing the previous combined 3 years. And the wall was stopped. We know there's been less enforcement at the border, less border patrol who are at wit's end. Texas and other border states are trying to do what they can. Just put this image up on the screen. Because there's no wall in Del Rio, Texas, the Texas governor ordered the Department of Public Safety to use their cars as the deterrent. I mean, look at that. Thousands of vehicles. Right now dealing with a crisis that really isn't truly explained to any of us. So right now it's thousands of Haitians. And I know we've talked about the border this week, but let's get to that number of what we're being told, at least by the Biden administration. So we know this is worse than the last 3 years combined. So it is not just as safe as it was before under the previous administration. That's an outright lie just based off statistics. But second, we're dealing with these different waves of people with different backgrounds for different reasons they're here. For instance, I've seen these flights they show between Haiti and the people who've been deported. But are most of these people, do we really think that 10,000 people from Haiti bought plane tickets and fled? That doesn't make sense either. So the story of how did all these individuals get, what groups are putting them there to cause these issues on top of the already huge problem? This is, when you look at the monthly numbers, small percent. You deal with 200,000 plus encounters a month right now. This is a small percent, but it's getting a lot of attention because the imagery, it's horrible. The conditions that the people are in, horrible. The way they're trying to blame our Border Patrol, also horrible. Misusing photos. People, they are on horseback for a reason. This is not a pleasant, peaceful protest that they're dealing with. They're dealing with a people who are risking their lives. They're trying to get out of a river and yet try to maintain some kind of order. But this administration, they love to blame the images on Donald Trump. We get back. Yeah, they're not blaming the Biden administration. This isn't their problem. This is Donald Trump's problem. Except for, as I just said, under their watch, it's equivalent to 3 years of President Trump's leadership at the border. When we come back on Sekulow, I want to take your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. What do you think should be done at the border, at the federal level or at the state level, to stem this? And are you feeling it in your community? I want to hear from people who have had these relocations made in their cities and towns to let us know what the impact has been like. 1-800-684-3110 to join us on the air.
Mr. Mr. President, what's your reaction to the images coming from the southern border?
Get it under control.
Get it under control, or you have it under control?
We will get it under control.
March was the highest month on record for illegal crossings until April, and then April was the highest month until May. May was the highest month until June. June was the highest month until July, when 212,000 illegal encounters on our southern border, and then August dipped all the way down to 208,000. I bet it still went up, but I bet there was people that they didn't encounter because they're busy doing all the other things with the Haitians in Del Rio and the Afghans coming here.
Our borders are not open, and people should not make the dangerous journey. Individuals and families are subject to border restrictions, including expulsion.
We are learning that the Biden administration has released thousands of Haitian illegal immigrants into the U.S. That directly contradicts the stated policy of immediate expulsion.
Homeland Security officials say thousands of migrants who were under that bridge have already been released inside the United States. Many given notices to appear at an immigration center within 60 days.
According to Border Patrol Chief Brandon Judd, over 600,000 of the illegal border crossers have been released since Biden took office 8 months ago. 600,000.
Border Patrol sources on the ground here in Del Rio tell me when it comes to this camp, they are now mass releasing pretty much all family units, as well as any women who claim to be pregnant. The idea being they want to get this camp cleared out as fast as possible.
Already at 1.2 million illegal immigrants, we're on a path to 2 million. And as long as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris refuse to apply the law, it's going to keep getting worse.
What is the reticence to call something that is so clearly a crisis? A crisis.
I call it a heartbreaking situation, a tremendous challenge.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls to 1-800-684-3110. Especially want to hear, this is one of the situations because it really does depend on where you live, but it's not necessarily that you have to live on near the border. Certainly you feel a much bigger impact if you do, but you could be in a place and there could be 1,000 people from Haiti in your city or from these other countries. You know, we've had these waves. First it was Central Americans. Remember that? It was a Central American waves. Now it's people from an island nation that has experienced a lot of trouble. Obviously, the recent earthquakes, the assassination of their president, it's been a troubled spot. But to think about the journey someone is putting these individuals on from Haiti to Central America up through Mexico to Del Rio. This is, again, and the numbers, thousands of people living in a tent city now, right across from the U.S. border in the midst of a pandemic. Let's not forget that. We don't let Canadian citizens in right now. Our northern border is still, for the most part, closed. And yet our southern border, this administration, afraid to call it a crisis, afraid to even label it, unless they're blaming the Trump administration. And this is key. I want to play Maxine Waters blaming the Trump administration. It's a very shocking statement that she makes about what these images are like. Do we have the sound, Will? Yes, Sheila Jackson. Oh, Sheila Jackson. Take a listen.
But what has happened is because of the Trump relic of Title 42 and the demonizing of immigrants through our Governor Abbott, who's looking toward the next election, we can't seem to really know how to handle this surge. I think the Biden administration is very eager to adhere to that we are a land of immigrants and a land of laws.
If we were a land of laws, Harry, I mean, I think Senator Cruz was on a Fox show, and his statement was just enforcing the existing laws would be the first step. That if you enforce the laws that were already on the books, you could deal with a lot of this problem. It's not all about having to come up with new laws and amnesty and dreamers. This is, if you enforce the existing law, yes, it would be tough, but this could be handled.
You're absolutely correct. Instead of enforcing existing law, however, the Biden administration has embraced lawlessness. So, Jordan, I think what we are witnessing with the Biden administration is simply the requiem for a once great superpower. We have embraced defeat in Afghanistan. We have surrendered our border to the open society, open border activists, and we have even surrendered our border to terrorists. And basically, the Biden administration continues to claim without a shred of evidence that the border is closed. This is a fabrication of the first order. Many people ask, why have we opened the border? Why do we have people living under a bridge in 107-degree temperatures? Why do we have more than 1.5 million illegals who have crossed the border so far this year? The answer, I think, is that the Biden border policy is simply intentional. They may see failure at the border as success. As Chuck Schumer has said, the goal of the Biden administration, the goal of the Democrats, is to radically transform America. And one of the best ways of transforming America is by bringing in new voters who are highly dependent on the Democrats to change both the political and perhaps racial landscape of the nation. So I think at the end of the day, what we have is an absolute failure by the Biden administration, and I see no end in sight to its acceptance of defeat.
So we heard again from Sheila Jackson Lee, and then Maxine Waters, which just to put fuel on the fire instead of any solutions, and still blaming the previous administration 9 months in. She said this to reporters: "I'm unhappy with the administration. We are following the Trump policy." Yeah, if they're following the Trump policy, the numbers would be back to what we saw between 2017 and 2020. Still a lot of people. No one was denying it was a crisis and a problem, but it was one being addressed. But then she went on to say, what we witnessed is worse than what we witnessed in slavery. Cowboys with their reins whipping black people, Haitians, into the water. The facts, that's not true. No one was whipped by a horse. The photo, I think it was just a unfortunate angle. That these guys are dealing with a very tough situation. They're not perfect. They are not divine. And they're dealing with a disaster on their hand, with a mass influx of people, while these members of Congress hide behind masks on Capitol Hill.
That's just a ton of deflection in that statement from Maxine Waters, Jordan. I mean, look, we've said it on this broadcast so many times. In order to have an effective border policy that works for everyone, both American citizens and people trying to come to America to make a new life, you need two things, Jordan. You need effective control of the border. That means you can't have people rushing over willy-nilly. You have to have a process. And then second, you have to have an intentional legal framework that people who are seeking a better life can use, Jordan. And if you don't have the first thing, if you don't have operational control, you cannot afford the second thing. So actually, during the break, you played some sound from Senator Blumenthal, I believe it was, where he said this is a heartbreaking situation. Jordan, I could not agree with him more. Now, his proposed solutions probably aren't the same ones that ours are, but Jordan, the United States of America cannot have a situation where thousands and thousands of people are rushing over our borders because they believe that there will be a better life for them. And Jordan, then they're met with this kind of condition. We have to have a secure border so that if people want to come here, there is a process by which they can use. And Jordan, one other thing that I just really alarmed me, we saw Secretary Mayorkas come to Capitol Hill, and he either has no idea or he won't tell us how many people are where. I mean, this morning, the department told Fox News that there were 15,000 people at the camp on Saturday, and there are somewhere around 4,000 now, and that about 1,700 had been expelled back to Haiti. And there's some question whether or not there had been a first tranche of 3,000. Either way, Jordan, that means there are somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 people that are unaccounted for. And the Secretary of Homeland Security, Jordan, he won't tell Congress where they are.
No, 2 days in a row he gets asked, Senate, House, different committees, different members of Congress. And yet this is the second time a day later for the same information. This is your DHS Secretary under the Biden administration. They want to push this on Trump. They're not there. They don't have any control over this. The 9 months of the surge all happened under Biden. Take a listen.
How many people have been returned? how many people are being detained, and how many people have been dispersed?
I would be pleased to provide you with specific data subsequent to this hearing.
Yesterday, you were asked exactly the same question, and you gave exactly the same answer. You'd think you'd be a little bit better prepared.
I work 18 hours a day. Okay, so when I returned from yesterday's hearing, I actually focused on mission.
First of all, what a liar. This is a guy who's got thousands of people working for him. He gets ushered around by security. He has tons of staff, support staff, an entire communications team, an entire data team, thousands of people out in the field. He is the head of a department of the government. And Harry, he acts like it's him going through and pulling the numbers and doing the data crunching.
Absolutely. So I'd like to see some of his econometric regression analysis, if he is prepared to share that with the American people. And he could perhaps once and for all lay to rest the fact that he perhaps lacks the personality to become a statistician. But in reality, what we have is a DHS Secretary who is simply missing in action. He is unprepared for testimony before Congress. He doesn't know what he is doing. And he keeps claiming that the border is indeed closed, notwithstanding open and obvious evidence to the contrary. So one of the first things Secretary Mayorkas should do for the American people is simply stop lying.
You know, I think, Dan, as you said, it's offensive and insulting, these statements he's making to members of Congress.
It's infuriating, Jordan. I mean, look, anybody who's done any work on Capitol Hill, quite frankly, any American citizen watching this hearing knows that the secretary is not the one doing the data input here. I mean, the idea that he's got to go back to the office and crunch the numbers, be a statistician himself in order to give that answer to Congress, Jordan, it's ridiculous. I'm here to tell you the person sitting behind him in that hearing probably has that number in a binder. They just don't want to give it to Congress. They don't want to give it to the American people because it doesn't fit their narrative. If I sound a little upset, Jordan, I am, because that is an outright lie. He is not the statistician. He is not the person that does the data input, but he is the person with the fiduciary responsibility to give Congress that number, and he failed to do it.
All right, folks, we come back. I want to start taking your phone calls. No, Heidi in Texas is be up next. But if you're dealing with this, you know, in your own community, 1-800-684-3110 to talk to us on the air. That's 1-800-684-3110. I'm holding in my hands our lawsuit. Anytime we're going to appear back from the court, because, of course, the government, the Biden administration, doesn't want to respond to our FOIA on why these shifts in the policies. What happened policy-wise, where we went from 1.3 million over 3 years to 1.5 million in 9 months.
There is a very serious situation on the border.
Straining the already broken U.S. immigration system. This is a, quote, humanitarian crisis on steroids.
Pretty clear we have a bigger problem now than we've had in years, and these policies have turned into becoming a magnet.
The President of the United States still hasn't been to the border. The Vice President went to El Paso, long ways away from the epicenter. And the Secretary of Homeland Security says the border's closed and secure.
Have to get control of our borders.
Over 12,000 people from Haiti, Mexico, other countries. This is utter chaos.
This is a huge failure of leadership, but one of the leadership things they teach us is that we have to think about what the military calls second and third order effects. In other words, how a decision impacts future results and how a poor decision can take a serious situation and make it even worse.
The failure to protect the border, the failure to care about national security leads inevitably to a disaster.
The problem is we don't have order and we don't have process.
What they're doing now, the lack of process, the lack of border security, is actually inhumane, that in and of itself.
It's failure compounded by failure.
It is barbaric is what it is to do that.
Yeah.
I see them walking across rivers holding packages above their heads so that they don't drown in the water, or a child who's abandoned in a little reed basket.
I mean, 12,000 people. They had a picture of a 3-year-old kid who's in basically a car seat and just left there. And this is horrific. And the Biden administration is clueless.
They're encouraging people to come
when there is no plan of action.
Right. None of the process is being put in place here. And I think that process is what is failing. And we're failing at a miserable rate. And we're putting human suffering front page on the papers. And we look like, as a country, we have no idea what we're doing.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. I want to start taking your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110 if you want to join us on the air. That's 1-800-684-3110. I really want to hear from people what you think the immediate response should be, and also if you're dealing with this in your communities, the mass amount of people. It's not just this group of Haitians, but it's been one group after another after another. I was just doing some research here because this is a lot harder to wrap your head around, right? Than Central American migrants looking for a better life, or people in Mexico looking for a better economic situation, or fleeing drug cartels. These are individuals, for the most part, who had already fled Haiti. So they were in what they're reporting in the news, two major cities in South America. One, Sao Paulo in Brazil, but that the majority were in Chile. And that they didn't start making this move, this idea that you could go from Haiti to South America and then make a move to get into the U.S. was not done until the Biden administration came into office. So that, I think that this is very important to point out why we're seeing these kind of waves of immigrants or people trying to immigrate or illegally cross, think they'll just get in and then be forgotten and be part of the shadow community in the United States of people who never have real legal status. But again, you scratch your head and say, this is not Central American. This is not Mexico. This is not, they're not South Americans either. But they were already in one different spot, and we don't know how long. But we do know is it is a serious crisis. It puts so much strain on law enforcement, the federal and the state and local level. Let's go to Heidi in Texas on line 3. Hey, Heidi, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air.
Hi there. I just want to preface my statement that I'm for Matthew 25, for helping the poor, feeding them, clothing them on a temporary basis. The church should be ministering to them, but also telling them to do it the right way, and the right way is to go back. Okay? The solution, in my opinion, I live here in Texas. I've been an activist for 29 years, is a mandatory E-Verify coupled with probably a 15 to 20-year moratorium. Once you shut off the incentives, the job magnet, they won't be coming. They'll be self-deporting. I feel for these people from Haiti because they're on an island. The others that come in here that apply for asylum, 97% of them are not asylees. They're economic migrants. They're gaming the system, and it's got to stop. And
not. And so if you look at it from several levels, you find that corporate interests are not aligned with the American interest. So, for instance, if you look at the agricultural industry, in that particular industry, they love migrants. They love cheap labor. But it goes beyond that. It goes to the tech world. It goes to Silicon Valley. It goes to New York City, because they are looking for a relatively cheap supply of nannies and caretakers and housekeepers, and the list goes on. And so I think at the end of the day, part of the problem is that the interest of elites in the United States are not aligned with American interests. The elites, they look for a global economy, a global world where labor can come in fairly cheaply, relieve them of the burden of taking care of their own children while they go out and make millions of dollars. So I think at the end of the day, one of the things that we need to do, in addition to e-verifying, is we need to impose penalties not only on corporations, but on individual employers who violate the law. I know that seems harsh, but I think at the end of the day, that is probably the way to go, because that would disincentivize many of these illegals. The last point I would make is that we also need to come up with a rational system for dispensing with social services, so that simply by appearing at our border, we perhaps need to determine whether or not someone is eligible to receive social assistance. And in my opinion, long term, we probably should give them emergency assistance, but then we should deport them quite quickly.
We have these moments, like you're talking about here, we have these moments where we see the humanitarian crisis, but we don't want to get tough enough to prevent future humanitarian crisis. So we say, oh, this policy would be too tough. But then we see the images again, then we talk about it again, then it goes away. It's like a new group of people suddenly has spurred this new interest. But as our producer Will pointed out, this is like not even a tenth of the amount of illegal border crossings going on. So they're dealing with maybe 15,000 right here, Than, but a month they're dealing with 200,000. So this is still it's a very small part of what our law enforcement, our border patrol is trying to deal with on a monthly basis or daily basis, this mass influx of people. And to think that, and they're being the ones criticized, they're being compared to slave owners and Nazis.
You've got all the ingredients, Jordan, for more of these camps to pop up across America. I mean, I really don't think this is going to be the last situation. And look, I so appreciated the perspective of the last caller. Matthew 25 is a passage that I try to live my life by, too. But, Jordan, I think it's really important for people listening to this to sort of separate the duties of, maybe someone following their faith. I'm a follower of Christ, and what I need to do to follow Christ, and then what the role of the federal government is, Jordan. I mean, I would say if any of these refugees, whether they're from Afghanistan or Haiti or anywhere else, if they show up in my community, Jordan, I should serve them. As a follower of Christ, I should serve them. But that's a little bit different than the role of the federal government. The role of the federal government is actually to put policies in place that allow America to continue to be a safe haven for those who are seeking a better life. And in order to do that, Jordan, you have to have control of your border. And as Harry pointed out, you have to have economic policies that actually allow for the growth and for the attraction to still come. So look, to the caller's point, each of these people is made in the image of God, and we should serve and meet their needs. But, Jordan, we're not going to be able to offer a better life for those who are seeking it if we don't have policies that allow us to control our border and to continue to be economically attractive. They both are appropriate here, Jordan, but you have to separate the role of an individual and the proper role of government.
Well, I want to take your phone calls to 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. How are you seeing this in your own communities, whether or not it's your border, in a border state or not? Because we also know that, like Than said, thousands of these people have been moved into the United States indefinitely. And you remember, there's already a language barrier here, but, a lot of those Border Patrol agents, they're bilingual, but they're not speaking French Haitian. So there's communication barriers there, huge, migrant issues that are huge, and the images do look horrible. No one is denying that. Everyone can feel for these people. But when the administration, we come back, acts as if they've got something in place and that this is being dealt with, we know that's not true. And we can't keep blaming Trump. By the way, under Trump, things were better. So they're trying to make that the bad image because the rhetoric was tough. Tough rhetoric scared people from trying to make these horrendous trips to illegally enter our country. So use tough rhetoric to say, you're not going to be welcome here. This is not going to be a friendly place to come. And then people don't put their lives at risk to try and get here by breaking the law. We'll be right back. Second half hour of Sekulow.
For more than 30 years, the ACLJ has been fighting for freedom and liberty in the United States and around the globe.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is urging Turkey to release detained American pastor Andrew Brunson.
This morning, Pastor Andrew Brunson, who was in prison in Turkey for nearly 2 years, has been let out of jail.
The ACLJ was at the very center of making the world aware of the plight of Pastor Brunson. They raised awareness of this, and then the administration took this very seriously. In my time in service, both as the CI director and as Secretary of State, I watched the good work that the ACLJ was doing here in the States and all across the world.
Well, I'm very happy to announce that former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is now a senior counsel for global affairs for the American Center for Law and Justice.
The work that we do will save lives and protect America and keep us free and safe and strong.
Your support of the American Center for Law and Justice, we're able to address these issues and take action.
The ACLJ today is needed now more than ever.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls to 1-800-684-3110. So you already had, this Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, telling off members of Congress, like, I don't have time to get you the numbers because I'm a busy guy. You have an entire department. I mean, you have no excuse for not being able to provide this. You have people, this is their only job is to figure out the statistics of how many people are at the border, how many are illegal, how many have been released back into the country, in our country and with court dates, how many people were deported. I mean, this is our entire divisions at DHS. This is all they would do. But he's, again, he just says to members of Congress, I worked too hard to get you that number. That's no excuse. This is not, a guy's not doing this all by himself. It's the only person it's a joke. These are the heads of departments. All they have to do is ask. One time. They get whatever information they want. But there's obviously reasons why they don't want Congress to have this data. They don't want the numbers, because every month the numbers are horrendous, but they don't want the real-time numbers getting out there. I want to go to the phones. Kim in Idaho on line 1. Hey, Kim, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So I have one question and one statement. My one question is, where's Kamala Harris? I don't think I've seen or heard from her in all of this, and that's my question. And my statement is, the American people, we the people, don't seem to have a problem protesting. I think it's time for us to stand up and start protesting this to close this border. This is ridiculous.
Well, I think, listen, it is one of those situations. It's a unique policy situation where this is why you have governments, why you make that contract as an individual, so to give up some liberty to have security, because this is not, you and I, you need the Department of Homeland Security. You need, Customs and Border Patrol. You need all these different government mechanisms. But I will tell you, they will not unleash, in the positive sense, the full weight of what the United States is capable of, because they will not allow states to take direct action. While Governor Abbott and the border state governors are constantly trying new ideas and new programs, every time they do that, they get challenged in court. And courts have, for a long time now, have said this is a federal issue. The federal government can allow states to take action and can kind of deputize the state law enforcement, but you can't force the federal government to do it. It doesn't matter how bad it is. You elect these people. You have to live with their policies. But take a listen to this, because you brought up Vice President Harris. This is a Democrat, Congressman Cuellar. He's asked about CNN and Vice President's trip. Take a listen.
In the wake of Vice President Harris's trip to Latin America, what do you think the impact has been? Has anything changed?
Without due respect, no.
Nothing. So it's not the Vice President's office, Harry. The Democrats are not. The honest Democrats here, who might not have the same policy solution ideas, but at least they're being honest by saying they've seen no change. In fact, it's gotten worse. We all know it's gotten worse. That's why it's in the news right now as we speak. The White House is trying to do damage control on it.
I think you're precisely correct. I would also offer a cautionary note with respect to Kamala Harris, though, that if she was involved in the border situation, undoubtedly things would be much, much worse. And that's hard to believe, of course. But I think at the end of the day, what we should keep in mind is that both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are missing in action. In other words, they have authorized a huge influx of illegals to become a massive super spreader of COVID throughout the United States. They're dispersing them on planes. They're not checking them for COVID infection status or, for instance, whether or not they are vaccinated. So I think at the end of the day, this is a deliberate failure by the Biden-Harris administration.
All right, folks, we come back. We're going to continue to take your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. Your questions. And I'd love to get comments from people who are living on the border or living in cities and towns where people oftentimes are just being dropped off. Told, hey, show up at this court date. Don't speak the language, don't have jobs, don't necessarily have connections to the community. And then they disappear into the shadows of America. We'll be right back.
How many people have been returned? How many people are being detained? How many people have been dispersed to all points around America?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
I want them now. Why don't you have that information now?
Senator, I do not have that data.
Why not?
For me.
Why don't you have that basic information?
I'm so disgusted with the constant lying for this administration. I was the ICE director. We do daily reports on who we put in detention and who we release. It's a matter of pushing a button to say how many people are released. They have that data. They're hiding that data.
Is this an issue of not knowing, or is this an issue of a lot more people are being released into the U.S. than are being sent out?
That is certainly not the issue.
Do the results that you're seeing and their magnitude suggest to you that your plan is wrong?
No.
Is your plan failing?
No, it is not.
Failure to enforce laws that exist in the United States leads to chaos, and chaos leads to inhumanity.
Where's the vice president on any of this?
She has been addressing the root causes of migration by working with countries in the region to ensure they have the assistance they need to reduce the number of people who are coming.
This is a president who makes a point when there are disasters in this country, like a wildfire or a hurricane, to go and see for himself firsthand what the needs are of the local community so that he can have an informed POV to make policy. Why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he go down to Del Rio, Texas and see what's going on?
Well, first of all, Peter, I think the situation at the border is the result of a broken system. And the president certainly relies on his experience.
All the president has to do is go back to what we were doing in December, the month before he took office. I'm talking about the Remain in Mexico program, the safe third country agreements, the border wall, and deportation.
Think about this. What has been the one single thing that's changed the most? If you're one of these individuals deciding whether or not it's worth risking your entire life, your children's life, to make this trip, the main single difference between making that decision a year ago and making that decision today is who's in charge of the federal government. The tone that they're setting. So, unfortunately, while this administration is deporting people too, they're not focusing on that issue. They're focusing in on humanitarian concerns and still blaming executive branch actors' behavior on an administration from a year ago. But they set the new tone. And the new tone, people thought, all right, time to come, time to go. And we're seeing wave after wave, shock after shock. We have to stop being shocked. I think every time you want to figure out, okay, what unique here is that the people happen to be from Haiti, so it's not just contiguous land. So that again, it shows you what we could be dealing with if that happened on a bigger scale. What if more people in these isolated countries that are facing tough times think this is the right time to put all of the life savings in and try to make this perilous trip? Or the fact that in the news, you're not really getting the distinction between people who fled Haiti post the assassination of their president and the last earthquake, and people who fled Haiti maybe from the earthquake before, or for some other reason, and were living for a decade in South America. You can't make asylum claims after you do that. The case is closed. You cannot go from one country to another, have a life there, and then decide all of a sudden you want to leave and then so they're not asylum claims. These are just this is basic immigration, and it doesn't mean that we have to be lack compassion. But I think creating these situations is the worst, because you're encouraging people to make this trip instead of discouraging them with tough talk and language. This is not going to be a welcome experience. You could die. You could be separated out from your family. You might get sent to some city in America where you can't speak the language. You have no connections or jobs. This is these kind of situations, and yet when the administration is asked specifically, if why won't Biden go? Why? What should we do better? I want you to take a listen to Congresswoman Presley. This is shocking because this is why the left has folded so much. Remember, the law hasn't changed. Think about that. There's no change in law from when Donald Trump was president to when Joe Biden has been president. So he doesn't have less power. There's no new hamstrings. But this is the idea. This is the internally what he's facing in the Democrat Party. Take a listen.
We can and we must do better. The Biden administration must halt these deportation flights and allow folks to make a legal asylum claim, which, by the way, is a human right and legal.
Harry, it's not legal. In fact, if the reporting is true, and most of these people were in a third party state already for years, you can't make the asylum claim anymore. You can apply to immigrate and wait your turn, but you cannot claim asylum, even if you were in a tough situation, because you already escaped that.
Absolutely. So one of the great things about Ayanna Pressley and the other members of the AOC group is that they fail to understand basic law. They fail to understand basic human rights law. The individuals, primarily under the bridge in Texas and Del Rio, are coming from Chile and from South America. This means they've already left Haiti. So even if their lives were at risk living in Haiti because of some type of oppression, they cannot now claim that they're coming to the United States to escape oppression that they've already escaped from. So her claim makes no sense. And so one of the important lessons that the American people should take from her statement and statements like many others is that you don't have to understand the law. You don't have to understand the Constitution in order to become a U.S. congressperson. And so many of these congresspeople are simply malinformed, but in some respects, it's even worse than that. They are deliberately and maliciously misstating the law.
Yeah, I want to go to Christine in Texas on line 4. Hey, Christine, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I have a question. What legally could Governor Abbott do here? Because I've heard some other governors say that he's limited, because here in Texas, we want the National Guard out, to stop this madness out here. And, that's just basically my question. My comment is basically, I just feel like they're just keeping all this going to be able to pass through their agendas.
Yeah, well, I think, Harry, we brought this up before. There are actions the governors can take, and the governor in Texas has taken some. I mean, we showed that image earlier in the broadcast. We can put it up again. These are Texas Department of vehicles. That's not federal government. That's not CBP, who are, in effect, creating a wall with vehicles in Del Rio to deal with this current, to try and deal with this current surge. So I will say they could try novel approaches. That's certainly novel as well, using the vehicles that way. But the federal court precedent, Harry, which is pretty recent, it's not like 50 years old, is that unless the federal government comes in and really deputizes these officials at the actual border, there's not so much they can do.
I think that is true.
They don't get to deal with the immigration court. And in some instances, they've got to immediately pass these people off if they apprehended any.
I think that is true. But I also think that Governor Abbott and the other border governors, they can do some things at the margin. For instance, they can enforce, anti-loitering laws or other laws that might inhibit illegal immigration to some extent. They can make sure that the laws are indeed enforced at the border. Texas laws are enforced at the border. They can deploy perhaps more National Guard troops at the border. again, to ensure law and order in border communities. But I think you are essentially correct, Jordan, that Governor Abbott cannot impair the processing of immigrants into the United States. They have the legal right to do so. I also understand that Governor Abbott is creatively thinking about, or at least proposing, to build a fence on private property so long as landowners will agree to that. And I think that will then perhaps limit access to the United States. But at the end of the day, it's the Biden administration. It's their failures that have produced this situation. You used a great word earlier, Jordan, about creating. The Biden administration has simply created the incentives and the conditions for a crisis at the border. Now that the crisis has come, the Biden administration has basically thrown up its hands and said, oh, it's President Trump's fault. This is childish behavior, but increasingly, I think the American people have come to expect that.
You know, I would play because you're hearing different things from the different. Obviously, one Democrat says get rid of the border and don't have any more deportations whatsoever. But Congressman Cuellar, who's a Democrat but a border, he represents a border district. Listen to how he breaks this down, because it's very important to understand. I think most people see this. It's a little bit of a head scratcher. How are this many people from Haiti at this spot in the border at the same time? But take a listen.
What I understand, there's at least another 30,000 Haitians in Mexico right now. There's also another 30,000 in Colombia also. I understand there's about 15,000 Haitians in Panama. So this surge of Haitians is not going to stop anytime soon. Now, are they coming directly from Haiti? No. Are they flying in from Chile and Brazil and other countries? Yes.
So, I mean, there you go. And then we can discuss that when we come back from this break, because that is very important. That we know, and if a Democrat member of Congress is stating the facts, at least we can hopefully agree on the facts, is that these individuals, what I would like to know is how long they spent in Chile or Brazil, where these flights are going in, from Haiti into. Is it recent? Have they been there for years? Why are we suddenly experiencing this surge from a specific place, specific people? But it wasn't because of the most recent events there that were so disastrous. So I want to, let's get to that till we come back from the break. If you want to be on the air with us, you still have time. 1-800-684-3110 to talk to us on the air. That's 1-800-684-3110. We'll be right back on Sekulow.
Thanks to your support of the ACLJ, we have had many victories.
The report is coming out. It shows that not only did Tea Party groups get more scrutiny, but so did a host of other conservative groups.
It was something that no one could believe our government was even capable of doing, and now they were admitting it.
It's one of the most significant wins in the ACLJ's history. To take on the IRS and win, for the ACLJ, life has always been a top issue.
Barbara, I am here at this site because there are thousands of people and millions across America that say abortion's murder.
When you're fighting for the life of the unborn, you're on the right side of history, you're on the right side of law.
These are young people in their 20s and 30s that are doing this, are fighting for life to beat back the abortion juggernaut.
It's very important that we remain hopeful that the courts that the Trump administration was able to impact will give us good rulings that are based in law and sound reasoning.
This is one of the social issues we're winning.
There are historians that point out that religious persecution is at its highest level since the first 3 centuries when the Roman Empire led religious persecution.
A mid-state pastor's family is fighting to bring him home.
We are getting my husband after 7.5 months.
Turkey should not get away with holding my father one more day.
When Brunson was finally released, Who meets him at the airport at 2:30 in the morning? Rick Grinnell.
I saw Pastor Brunson walk down the stairs of the plane. I was filled with emotion. I told him that we were praying for him. The American people never forgot about him.
I'm thankful, I'm grateful, and actually I'm astounded.
We need your help as we continue this work here in the United States and around the world.
Welcome back to Sekulow. I want to go right to the phones. William in Alabama on line 1. Hey, William, welcome to Sekulow. You're on the air.
Yes. My question is, how can the migrants who are coming here, who are requesting asylum, ask for asylum when I thought you had to do that in the first country you come to when you're fleeing a country?
So, William, you might when you were holding, because you're right. You're understanding. I love our audience because you can tell they're educated, and it's not something you would necessarily, if you weren't an immigration attorney, these are things that, again, you have to learn to understand how the law works and international laws, because this involves, of course, this is kind of like the law of nations. Then we do all this refugee work, and that's why I posed at the end of the last segment, the timing is very important. The Congressman Cuellar clearly said without any kind of issue, so they figured out this is mostly coming out of Brazil and Chile, and that's where these flights are coming to get people up to near our border. He went through the numbers, which are pretty staggering. We're still talking about 75,000 plus people from this one movement of a specific group of people from Haiti are still out there somewhere in Central America. But the basics of the law of asylum is that if you're fleeing because of this danger to your life and these specific reasons. And, unless you were just, basically, if you get off the aircraft and you have the ability to make the asylum, so you're not still maybe at the airport, then William is right, and none of these individuals then would have an asylum claim. It would, even if you had a reason, because you got someplace else, and the whole idea of asylum is it's so bad for you individually. People are going to kill you because of who you are, not because you're part of a group of a country that has bad economics. So, Than, if they touch down there for any period of significant amount of time, which doesn't take much, that's where the claims should be made. Those countries might not be as friendly, but that is where they came first. And that's why we need to know how long are they on the ground. What does this look like on the ground in Brazil and Chile? We should be able to figure that out.
Yeah, maybe Vice President Harris has a point in checking the conditions in those locations. She wanted to talk about the original causes. Maybe this is the original cause she should look at. But by the way, Jordan, as you well know, this asylum law, this is not just unique to the United States. This is true around the world. If you are genuinely on the run for your life, seeking asylum from another country, you are to make that claim in the first safe country you enter in. So, Jordan, the vast majority of these Haitian migrants, so to speak, are not eligible for an asylum claim. So Congressman Presley can say they need to be allowed to make the asylum claim. Jordan, they're not a legitimate asylum claimants. And I would tell you this, it's not just being cold-hearted. If we are going to use our resources to process applications from people who are not genuinely on the run for their lives, what is that doing, Jordan? It is detracting those resources from where they should be applied, which is to legitimate asylum claimees. And we've worked on this for many decades, Jordan. You've done many of these cases personally. We care about the asylum process. And if you're going to pull resources away from it, from people who do not have a legitimate claim to asylum, that is doing a dramatic wrong to many people involved. It's doing a dramatic wrong to the United States citizen. It's doing a dramatic wrong to these Haitian migrants who might be eligible under another program. And Jordan, maybe most egregiously, it's doing a violent wrong to someone who is legitimately running for their lives and ought to have the attention of the United States officials who are supposed to be processing asylum claims.
Yeah, this is, if you think about the size of these numbers that the congressman's talking about there's still 75,000 people out there. Harry, this does go back to, I know it was tongue-in-cheek a little bit what Dan said, but our vice president did go to these other countries, and yet it feels like they weren't prepared for this at all. So why aren't we working with Brazil? Why aren't we working with Chile to know that these individuals, these are mass amounts of people for them too, to understand. So because they always act like they're shocked. Everyone is always acting shocked and surprised by what's going on at the border, as if they have no way of knowing these mass influxes of people are making their way there.
You raise a very good point, and what we have on our hands is another massive intelligence failure. It's just like we failed to predict the collapse of Afghanistan. We failed to predict the arrival of Haitian immigrants from South America. And so some of these individuals apparently are traversing 3,000 to 4,000 miles, perhaps on foot, through many other intermediate countries. And yet the DHS Secretary claims that he's surprised. They just showed up out of thin air. They didn't fly in from Haiti. Most of these individuals have been out of Haiti for years. And yet this DHS Secretary, who lacks an understanding of statistics, also lacks an understanding of incentives. We have incentivized this influx. We have incentivized. We have created this disaster. And I think the sooner the American people recognize this, the sooner the American people take action, the sooner we can solve this crisis. But I don't expect the Biden administration to take really any affirmative steps to solve the crisis. We continue to hear that Kamala Harris is working on root causes. Perhaps she can link the people underneath the bridge to the root cause of climate change or some other fictional claim. But I think at the end of the day, the Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris and President Biden don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, this is so, we just posed this question. How do you not figure this out? And so Mayorkas, our Homeland Security Secretary, he's saying they do watch it. It's just too fast. Take a listen to Byte 35.
We watch the flow of individuals who are seeking to migrate irregularly through Mexico from the Northern Triangle countries and further south. We do indeed track it. And nevertheless, Congressman, as I previously articulated, the speed with which this materialized is unprecedented.
I'm looking at a shantytown created on our border. That does not happen overnight. These individuals, if we know they're coming in from very far away, it's not like it's an easy walk from Sao Paulo to the border. I mean, so that's not how you're moving there. You're moving there via aircraft. So this should not be too difficult for the federal government. Here's the last minute of the broadcast. Here's the problem. One thing we haven't talked about on this show today at all is there new legislation that you could utilize to help give the federal government more power or fine tune, or the states? Here's the issue. The Congress is so divided, and this is one of those issues that inside the Democrat Party, there's tons of division on. I want you to remember that President Trump was willing to provide the quote-unquote dreamers with a pathway to citizenship if we secured the border. The Democrats said no. And now the border is unsecured. And it's wave after wave after wave, and a humanitarian crisis of our own doing that we created. This is our fault because of the new tone we set and the laws we stopped enforcing. But we can't look to Congress right now to try to fix this. But our president has a lot of power here, a lot of executive power, and is acting like they are in the dark. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Sekulow.